Hey guys, BrandonioProductions here, and first of all, I'd like to apologize for my theme that I'm using. It's going to make the application that we're developing look a little funky if you're using the default theme and trying to compare what our applications look like, but you should be able to manage. Alright, so this tutorial is going to be about how to create your own versions of already existing controls in Visual Basic .NET 2008 and 2010. For this video, I'm going to be using Microsoft Visual Studio, and I'm using the .NET Framework 2.0 in this tutorial project. So, what we're going to be doing here is, say that we have this form, and what we want is we want to build our, let's just say, our own stopwatch. So that is, you press a button, and once you press that button, you want the stopwatch to start incrementing from 0. So this is actually really easy to do. But the thing is, we want our stopwatch to display as a label. And this is just basic functionality of VB.NET. And so let's go ahead and get started. So since we want our stopwatch to display as a label, the first thing we're going to need to do is go up here to this Add New Item button and press Add New Item. And then we're going to go ahead and choose a class file. Now, a class file is just, when you're using object-oriented programming like we're using now, a class is essentially just an object. So we're going to name this class stopwatch, since we're going to be making a stopwatch. And as you can see, we jump right into the coding here. There is actually no physical designer for this class, but that's okay because we don't need one. So like we said, what we want our class to do is actually function as a label. So all we do is we make it a subclass of a label by typing inherits label. So now our stopwatch is actually a label. So now the next thing we need to do is we actually need to add the stopwatch functionality to it. But before we do that, I just want to demonstrate the things you can do with this. So if we go back to Form 1 here and we actually save all of the project and then we actually rebuild the project, we can actually go into our toolbox, and in our toolbox we have this new panel called Inherits Tutorial Components. So this is our project components, and all we've got here is the stopwatch. So if we actually drag this onto our form, it says stopwatch 1, but if we look over at the properties here, everything is just like a label. So we can actually change the text to label 1, and you wouldn't even be able to tell the difference. That's because it is a label. So we're just going to go ahead and delete this and jump right back into our stopwatch here. So, the first thing we need to do is we actually need to think about how we're going to design this stopwatch. Obviously, if we're going to design a stopwatch, what we need to do is we need to add a timer to our stopwatch. So we're going to create a new private variable, and we're going to call it private timer as, private timer as timer. And then we also are going to mess with the constructor. Now, a constructor is all the code that is executed when a new instance of this object is created. So when we actually add the stopwatch from the toolbox onto the form, this method is called. So what we want to do is this timer is actually nothing at the moment, so we actually want to set it to something equals a new timer when the project starts. So since we're going to have a stopwatch, we're going to need to keep track of milliseconds, seconds, minutes, and hours. So the next thing we actually need to do is say timer.interval equals 1. So that's setting the timer interval equal to 1 millisecond, which means every millisecond we are actually going to be incrementing, or every millisecond we're going to be calling whatever the timer has to do. So the next thing we need to do is we need to actually access the information, or we actually need to access the method that is called every time this timer ticks. So if you are unfamiliar, a timer is actually an object that ticks every specified interval, and every time it ticks you can call a certain amount of code. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to make a new method called timer_tick, and this method will hold all of the commands that we need that will take place every time the timer ticks. But for now, this timer tick will never be called. So we actually need to tell Visual Basic to, every time this timer ticks, call this method. So we're going to need to add a handler. So we're adding the handler of every time the timer that we created .tick, and we're going to send it to the address of timer tick. So now every time this timer ticks, we're going to execute what's in here. So now there's going to be a few other methods that we're going to need to create here. We're going to need to create a start stopwatch method that's going to essentially start the stopwatch. We're also going to make a stopwatch method, and okay, let's just do that for now. Now, in order to get this timer to work, so let's just say we start the stopwatch now. So what it needs to do is it needs to take the current system time and actually subtract it from the system time, or the time as soon as we press the start button, and that's how we're going to get our current value. So we're also going to need to create a new variable, private start time as date, and this variable is going to be initialized every time we start the timer. So when we start the stopwatch, we're going to say start time equals now, and then we're going to say timer.enabled equals true, and timer.start. So what this is essentially doing is it's setting the start time equal to now, and then it's starting the timer so this method can be called. Every millisecond, that is. So with the stopwatch, what we want to do is we just want to say timer.enabled equals false, and then timer.stop. Okay. So, what we're going to do here on the timer tick is we're just simply going to create a new time span, and this time span is actually going to keep track of how much time has elapsed since the start time. So we're going to say dim time span as time span equal to now.subtract start time. So we're essentially taking the time now and subtracting the start time, and then we are displaying, or then we're getting how much time that actually is as a time span variable. So then what we need to do is we actually need to display it in a stopwatch format. So we're going to say me.text, because remember, we are still accessing a label, so we're just setting the text of the label. We're going to say equals, so on a stopwatch, the first thing you see is hours, so timespan.hours, and then we're going to add in a colon, which can be done with the ampersand, and then adding in a colon. And then we're going to add in timespan.minutes, and then we are going to add an ampersand and a colon again, and then timespan.seconds, ampersand, colon, and timespan.milliseconds. So essentially what we just did is we created our own version of the label, and this version actually functions as a stopwatch. So we can actually go back to our regular form here, and what we're going to do is we're now going to add two buttons to our form, button 1 and button 2. Button 1 is going to act as the start stopwatch, and button 2 is going to act as the stop stopwatch. And then we're just going to go ahead and rebuild our project, and then we're going to go in our toolbox and drag in the latest version of our stopwatch class that we just created onto the form. So as you notice, it automatically gives it the name of stopwatch1, so we're going to access that in the code for the buttons. So when this start button is clicked, we're going to say stopwatch1.start stopwatch. So as you remember, start stopwatch is actually the method that we created inside of the stopwatch class. So now if we go back to our form and click on or double click the stop button, we can actually say stopwatch1.stop stopwatch. So now if we actually run the project, we can see that it looks like we have a label and two buttons. A label with the text of stopwatch 1 and two buttons with the text of start and stop. However, if we actually press the start button, you can see that it immediately starts acting as a timer, or a stopwatch rather. So all we're doing is we're constantly just getting the current system time and comparing it to when we press the start button. So it has been 17 seconds since we have actually pressed the start button. Now we can actually press the stop button, and it freezes the timer. So that is basically how to actually create your own version of a control. So we just created our own version of a label, and we asked it to function as a stopwatch. Now there are several other applications of this. You don't always have to make your own version of a label. You can make your own version of a picture box, and a member on BP forums named Vinwares is actually trying to create his own little space game, and in order to actually make each enemy drawable onto the screen, he's going to need to make an enemy class that inherits a picture box. So the picture box can actually be added onto the screen. But in order to actually do that, no, actually, you know what? Let's do that now. So we're just going to go ahead and delete the stopwatch, the start, and the stop button from the form, and then we're going to add a new class. So what we're going to do with this class is we're just going to make something that inherits a picture box in order to show the BP Forums member Vinwares exactly what to do. So we're just going to call this, let's just say, let's call it, I don't know, something fancy. Not really that fancy. But let's call it plant. So this is the plant class, and it's giving us a few errors because our stopwatch code is still there. So this is the plant class, and what the plant class is going to be is it's actually going to be something on the screen that it's just going to be a picture box, but it's going to have a custom picture by default. So the first thing we actually need to set it to do is inherit from the picture box class. So we're just going to say inherits picture box. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to say public sub new. So once again, this is the constructor, and it's actually going to be called every time the picture box is placed on the screen. So this time we're actually going to do something different. Now this new method is called every time the plant is actually put on the screen. But what we need to do is we also need to tell it to call what it's supposed to do, or tell it to do what it's supposed to do when a new picture box is placed on the screen. So we can do this by typing in mybase, and that is actually accessing the class that we're inheriting. So we're going to say mybase.new. So that is basically just calling the constructor of the picture box. Okay, so now that that's complete, when a new plant is created, what we want it to do is we always want it to be a picture of a plant. So I'm actually going to go on the internet right now and grab a random picture of a plant. And then I'm just going to press images. And let's see here. What do we got? What's a good plant? This is a nice plant, don't you think? Yeah. So we're just going to go ahead and get this plant image here. It's actually from IKEA, so no copyright infringement intended. We're just going to save the image to my B drive here, and I'm just going to call it plant. And it is a JPEG image. So then we're going to go ahead and go back to the actual class here, and we're going to add the plant as a resource. So we're just going to go to the properties here, go to the resource tab, and click add resource and add existing file. Then we simply need to navigate to my B drive where I saved it to, and add in the plant file. So we now have a new resource that all of our classes can access called plant. So every time a new plant is created, we want to change the picture box's image to a plant. So we can do this by saying me.image equals my.resources.plant. So this is accessing the image property of the picture box. Now we also want to make it an appropriate size, an appropriate width and height, so it fits the plant image. So we're just going to say me.width or me.size equals new system.drawing.size, and then we need to specify a width and height. So we're going to need to get the width and height of the plant picture. So we're going to say my.resources.plant.width and my.resources.plant.height. So now we're just, as soon as we create a new one, we are setting the image to a plant image, and we're setting the size to a plant size. Now, one of the neat things about actually creating your own version of controls is you can still access the methods that are called within the subclass, or the superclass rather. So in our picture box method, or in our plant method, we can actually get all of the events that can occur with the picture box. So for example, if the mouse clicks on the picture box, we can actually have something happen. So if you click on the picture box, we're going to have it, let's just say, shrink, cut the size in half. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if me.width is equal to my.resources.plant.width. So if the widths are equal, then we need to shrink the image. So we're going to say me.width size equals new system.drawing.size my.resources.plant.width divided by 2, and my.resources.plant.width divided by, or this is height actually, height divided by 2. So we are essentially just cutting the image, or cutting the picture box in half. However, if the width is not equal to the picture width, so that means it's these are the widths and heights of the picture box, we're just going to say, well, actually all we need to do is set it here. So we're just going to copy and paste that code snippet, and we can go ahead and actually jump back to our form here, press File, Save All, and then rebuild our project, and now we can actually drag the plant onto the actual form itself. Now as you can see, as soon as we drag it on, it automatically sets our image to the plant image. And that's because we created a new instance of the plant object, and therefore it called the new method. So if we run this program, we can actually see that all it looks like is a program with a plant image. But if we actually click on the picture box, it actually changes its size just like we told it to. So essentially we just created our own picture box class, and we can use this several times. So for example, if you wanted just a bunch of these picture boxes, you could say, let's just go into the plant class here. And when you click on the, no wait. Yes. So now we can actually access the plant class inside of the actual form itself. So when the form loads, say we want to add 5 plants onto the form. So we can do that by creating a simple for loop. So we're going to say for I as integer equal to 1, and if we want it to do it 5 times, we're going to need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to go from 1 to 5, and we're going to increment I by 1 each time. So this is going to execute this code inside of here 5 times. And now we're just going to say me.controls.add, and then we're going to create a new plant. So that's very simple. So now if we click on Start Debugging, it looks like we simply have one plant object here, but we actually have 5. So if we shrink one plant object, or by clicking on it, yes. So we actually have 5 plant objects to deal with. So I had to click the plant object 5 times in order to actually get the shrinking available. However, we can do this by specifying the location of the plant before we actually place it. So we can say dim plant as new plant. So this is creating the new picture box plant class we created. And then what we want to do is we want to get a new place. So we want to set each one up so it's at it's directly next to the previous one. So we're actually going to change our loop to go from 0 to 4, which still executes 5 times, but you'll see why we need this in a second. So we're actually going to say dim x as integer equal to mine.resources.plant.width times I. So what we're doing here is, say we're starting off at 0, so this is going to give us an x value of 0. Starting off at 1, it's going to give us an x value of the plant width. So it's just going to nail a whole bunch of plant images horizontally next to each other. And then we're going to say plant.location equals new system.drawing.point. And we're going to send an x as the x integer, and then plant.y, or location.y as the y coordinate. And then all we need to do is say me.controls.add plant. So we can definitely edit the plant straight from the form, even though it's our own custom class. So we're going to go ahead and run this, and as you can see, we've got lots of plants to deal with here. 5 of them, in fact, and each one is a separate plant object. So if we click on each one, you can see that it shrinks when we actually click on them. So I've just alternated shrinking, and we can shrink them all. We can double size the ones that we want, and so this is perfect if you want to have multiple things that do the same thing in a business application, or if you want to create a game and you actually need multiple enemies or multiple bullets to be on the screen at once. You can do this by creating your own separate class. So this was just a basic overview of how you can use polymorphism in order to, it's a big word, but it just basically means the inherit statement that we used. So of how you can use the inherit statement to create your own versions of existing classes. In this tutorial, we created a stopwatch from a label and a plant image from a picture box. So thanks for watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out the newly upgraded BP forums. I'm sure there'll be plenty of discussion on this video there. And thanks for watching this tutorial. Please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe, and have a fantastic day. See you guys.